The Trek Geeks Podcast Network is proud to have Fansets as its presenting sponsor. Fansets is the place for amazing pin collectibles with over 400 officially licensed Star Trek pins and new releases every month. Stay tuned for a special discount code good on your next order at fansets.com just for Trek Geeks listeners. Fansets. Our pins have character.
This episode is also sponsored by Science Division, the makers of the galaxy's first interactive tribble that you can control with your very own smartphone. See their limited edition giant silver tribble available for pre-order today at sciencediv.com. Science Division. Trouble's never been this fun.
Hi, this is Gates McFadden, who played Dr. Beverly Crusher from Star Trek The Next Generation, and you're listening to the Trek Geeks Podcast with Bill Smith and Dan Davidson.
From the production vision of Podfleet Command, it's the biggest little show this side of the Alpha Quadrant and the flagship of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. Greetings to you, humans, aliens, other species all across the galaxy, known and unknown, and welcome to the Trek Geeks Podcast. This is episode number 292, and I am your co-host, Bill Smith, and we are so glad that you're here with us today. We have a great episode on tap for you today, and of course, when I say we, that means I'm not doing this alone. As many times as I wish I were, I'm not. And of course, I can't really give him any crap because, you know, he's kind of doing okay this week. He's the largely tolerable Dan Davidson. And Dan, that's a great one on tap today, buddy.
Oh, man. Thanks for having me, man. It's always a pleasure for your wonderful introductions. And I got a nice one today. Thank you.
Wait, thanks for having me. You're the co-host of the damn show.
You know what? That's right. Co-host, which you could kick me out at a moment's notice because you run the show. Oh, yeah, okay. Back to normal. No, but it's great to be here. Like you said, we have a fantastic episode lined up this week, man. We've had the opportunity to get to know this guy over the course of the last year, virtually only. We finally did get to meet him in Vegas a few weeks ago, and we're going to have a great conversation with director David Livingston, who has directed 62 episodes of Star Trek over the years, which is it's one of those records that will probably never be broken. I hope it isn't broken because he's a wonderful guy, and we're going to have a great conversation with him today.
You know, nobody actually comes close as far as number of episodes directed. Frakes is a distant second. I mean, when you count that he's done 2 feature films, I mean, that's pretty significant. Mm-hmm. But 62 episodes is the kind of thing I don't think we'll ever see again in Star Trek. And it doesn't hurt that David is one of the genuinely nicest guys on the planet.
Yeah, he really is. He's so much fun to be around. He just is always smiling. All the times that we talk to him, he's smiling and he's very proud and happy of the work he's done in Star Trek. And as you'll see in the conversation, it changed his life, which has happened for so many people involved in Star Trek, and couldn't happen to a nicer guy. So it's going to be a fun conversation.
100% looking forward to it, even though you're a part of it, which will be pretty great.
Back to normal, like I said.
Well, some things never change. Dan, of course, we want to take this moment to thank our friends at Fansets for being the presenting sponsor of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network.
Yeah, absolutely we do, man. They're great friends and amazing business partners. And the thing is, we just really love their product. You know, the pins are awesome, and they're constantly releasing new Star Trek stuff because they're huge fans just like we are. So head on over to fansets.com right now and check out the 2 new latest releases, which are the Women of Trek Raffi Mussaker pin. Is it Mussaker or Musaker? I've always wondered.
It's Musaker, I believe.
Musaker, thank you. All right. As well as the dreaded Confederation Delta from Picard Season 2. Now, this Delta, as all the other ones these days, is available in both magnet and pin form over at fansets.com.
Great additions to any collection, Dan. And I know you love the Raffi pin because with all the Women of Trek pins, they got that glitter going on, man.
Glitter's awesome.
Glitter. So everyone, you know I tell you every week, I mean it just as much this week. Head on over to fansets.com, put that Raffi pin in a Confederation Delta, you know, the one with the blades on the edge, and get a whole bunch of other pins because you're going to want them, and some accessories, maybe even a gift certificate. Put those in your cart. And at checkout, be sure to enter the special discount code TrekGeeks for 10% off your entire order. That's TrekGeeks in all capital letters with no spaces. And of course, don't forget, when you spend more than $30 on fansets.com, you will automatically get free shipping in the United States.
Fansets. Our pins have character, and we thank our friends at Fansets for being the presenting sponsor of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. So, Halloween's coming, and that means some pretty special stuff will be coming your way from Science Division.
Halloween, one of your favorite holidays.
Yes,
one
absolutely.
of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, all next month, Science Division will be posting their daily Tribble Halloween cosplay photos on their social media. So you will definitely want to give them a follow to see those because they're just so much fun. Also, the Silver Giant limited edition Tribbles are more than halfway sold out already.
Wow.
At this rate, they could be gone by year's end, and you definitely want to get yours now because once they're gone, no more of the giant silver Tribbles will be imported from the Tribble homeworld.
Plus, did we mention that the Tribbles are interactive? Yep, the Science Division Tribble has its own app that you can use to control the Tribble. It's not necessary, but it is a lot of fun to make it scream at people like incredibly awesome podcast co-hosts like my friend Bill. Fret not, however, everyone except him knows that. You know, I'm going to say it. Here we go. Bill, Tribbles are not dangerous, my friend.
I'm amazed that you read that copy the way I wrote it.
And I have first read, too.
I know. I'm stunned. So, of course, get your Tribble today. Head on over to sciencediv.com right now to pick up one of the galaxy's first interactive Tribbles for your very own. Plus, while you're there, check out their new and improved shop accessory section where you can get all kinds of Science Division swag, like mugs or tank tops, or since, you know, today is the first day of autumn here in the United States, maybe even a nice warm sweatshirt to keep yourself warm on the crisp fall days that are coming our way.
Science Division. Trouble's never been this fun, and we thank our friends at Science Division for sponsoring this week's episode.
Hi, Dr. Phil Phlox, also known as John Billingsley, speaking. I am the president of the board of the Hollywood Food Coalition. We serve terrific multi-course meals to the unhoused and to those in need 7 nights a week. We assist as many as 100 nonprofits with their food needs, buttressing extraordinary social service programs. We work with community partners to address issues of food insecurity here in SoCal. We do lots of other great stuff, but how much time do we have? If you're in LA, come and volunteer with us at hofoco.org/volunteer, and any Federation credits you can spare go a long way.
Well, Bill, you know, we've had amazing guests here on Trek Geeks over the past several years. Wonderful actors with their unique stories of all things Star Trek. We've called some of them living legends, but I really am not sure that they rise to the status of today's guest, who is indeed a living Star Trek legend. He started out in the Star Trek universe as a unit production manager in 1987 on TNG's pilot episode Encounter at Farpoint, and moved up in rank to become a supervising producer in 1992 on TNG and subsequent Star Trek series. In 1991, he directed his first episode of Star Trek, TNG Season 4's The Mind's Eye, went on to direct one more TNG episode, and then directed 17 DS9 episodes, 28 Voyager episodes, and 15 Enterprise episodes. That is a mind-blowing 62 directing credits in the Star Trek universe, which is by far a record. He's helped sculpt what we now call the legacy Star Trek universe in so many ways. And heck, man, even Picard's lionfish Livingston was named after this amazing human being. In addition to all his work on Star Trek, he is a member of the board for the Hollywood Food Coalition, which we were honored to partner up with last year for our highly successful Trek Talks Telethon, which raised over $80,000 for HOFOCO. And we're going to do it all again this coming January 14th, 2023 with Trek Talks 2. Bill and I have gotten to know this man through our work on putting together the telethon, and not only is he Star Trek royalty, we are very honored to call him a dear friend. He is Mr. David Livingston, and David, it's great to have you here, man. It's been a long time coming, and we are just thrilled to finally be able to talk to you about Star Trek today.
I love you guys.
I can't even bust Dan Stones for that intro because it was perfect. It was awesome. Normally I give him grief for going on and on and on, but I wouldn't change a moment of that intro. And it's so thrilling to have you here.
Well,
I bet you never thought you'd be here a year ago.
I didn't, but you say living legend. The only living I am is Livingston. Now that's about it. I think
that was good. That might be a keeper. I like that one. Well, David, like I said, we got to know you over the course of the last year and planning the telethon, and it's been so great to hear some of your stories and to finally meet you in person after all that time in Vegas just a few weeks ago. We said, man, can't believe we haven't had him on the show. So we're glad you're here. And my first question is going to be to really make you think hard about the very first time you directed a Star Trek episode back in TNG season 4 with The Mind's Eye. You've been working on TNG for a while doing various things. What was it like for you to step into that director's chair for the first time, knowing the universe that you were being a part of?
I went to film school to become a producer director, and it never really happened until I had the opportunity to work on Star Trek. And Rick Berman established the DIT school, which is a director and training school. And he asked me if I wanted to go to school to potentially direct an episode. And I said, sure. So for 6 months, I studied by studying other directors on the set, going to post-production, doing everything, looking at the show from a director's point of view. And at that point, Rick said, are you ready? And I said, yep. And he gave me a shot. And the moment I stepped on the stage, I felt like I died and gone to heaven. I was never a fan of being a unit manager or line producer, a numbers cruncher, having to manage the production and all that. I did it because it was a job, but directing was my bliss. And that moment where I first got on the stage was electrifying for me. And I felt at home, which was a great feeling.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, because that episode sets up so much for later on in that season too, with sort of the shadowy figure in the background, which is Geordi's being programmed and stuff like that. That's actually one of my favorite episodes. I just put it together today that was your first directorial credit.
Yeah, John Fleck. He was great in the episode. I'm a fan of his work. He's really good. And the guy who played the Klingon, he directed the original series, I think, or he was an episodic director as well. Do you remember his name?
I got to look him up now. I don't.
Yeah,
Bill's fantastic.
I'm not sure if he directed the original series. He may have. That may be apocryphal. I'm not sure. But
that's one of the things that's really cool about Star Trek is you get people that have been involved in all kinds of the different various chapters of all the different series. So when we have somebody who comes on to one of the legacy shows, as it's, I guess now is what's being called, who used to be on the original series, that's always kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite a history. I was just looking up the guy's name. But go ahead, keep talking.
Lawrence Dobkin.
Oh yeah, Larry Dobkin. And let me see.
His IMDb is a who's who of 60s and 70s television. My word, you've got everything from Charlie's Angels to Fantasy Island to Hawaii Five-0.
Oh yeah, he did it all.
Wow.
Emergency.
He directed the original series first season episode Charlie X.
Oh my God! Yes, he did.
Now, how about that? That was so cool because I remember talking to him about it, and I felt kind of honored to be directing him because of the history that he brought to that particular episode.
I've never put that together. That's episode 2 of the original series as it was broadcast.
Isn't that crazy? What a small world show business is.
Wow. Oh
pretty crazy. Yeah.
My mind is blown. We could stop right now, and I'm good. No, I'm kidding. So, I mean, obviously, you've had a few different roles within Star Trek as with producer in the title. And I mean, granted, I've never worked in television. What is the difference between, say, supervising producer and line producer? Because I see the credits at TV shows today have like 30 executive producers, but
more money.
Yeah, yeah, there's that.
That's the only difference.
Really,
unit production managers below the line. Producers get above the line. They get more money and they have less responsibility than the unit manager. And as I progressed on the show, Rick kept giving me better and better credits, but my job was exactly the same. It didn't change. So that's the nature of the beast. The executive producer credit in television is usually a writing producer, and the showrunner is almost exclusively a writing producer. Rick was sort of hybrid. He both wrote for the show, but he was also the executive producer for the production overall. But most of the executive producer credits on the show were writing credits.
It's I wish that our jobs could be as easy as having the same responsibility but getting paid better.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
That's always been my goal in life. Less work, more money.
Speaking of, you spoke about writing just a moment ago, and it came to a surprise to both Bill and I last week, David, when we were discussing having you on, that you actually have a writing credit for Deep Space Nine for the Nagus. So
I do indeed.
Tell us a little bit about that whole process.
Well, I probably pitched 50 episodes. They bought 2 of them. One of them they didn't produce, and it was about Mrs. Troy and Data being trapped in a shuttle pod together, lost out in space. And it's how these 2 oddballs came to terms with each other. They didn't produce it. But the one they did produce was a business kind of thing with Quark, where he becomes the big mucky muck. And the B story was Jake teaching Nog how to read and helping him in school. That's the part of the story that they bought. But Ira, in his graciousness, still gave me a story credit for it. But I went to the story break for the Nagus, and they had to figure out what the A story was. They wanted to do something that my original idea focused on, about Quark becoming a big mucky muck, but they didn't know quite what to do. And I'm sitting in the story break, and this is where my admiration for writers took a quantum jump. Michael Piller looked at everybody in the room and said, "Let's do The Godfather." And everybody's eyes just lit up. The light bulbs went on above everybody's head. And he pointed over at Ira and he says, "Ira, write it." And Ira wrote it over the weekend. And the next day came in and they handed me this script. And we did The Godfather.
Yeah.
And it's obviously one of my favorite films. And we did an homage to it because they wrote the opening scene of The Godfather in the Nagus. And I was able to involve all these little bits from The Godfather. For instance, instead of having Brando stroking a cat, Michael Westmore gave me one of his pencil-nosed geeky creatures that he strokes in it. And I had Armin, because he's got these big ass ears. Yeah. I had him kept flicking his ears. I showed him the clip from The Godfather. He says, "See how Brando keeps doing that thing to his ears? If you do that on your ears, it's going to be hilarious." So I thought that was hilarious. And then the other thing was, I said, and at the production meeting, I said to the art department, I said, "We need shutters on the windows, big wooden shutters." And Rick turned to me, sitting next to me, because I'm the director and he's the executive producer. He says, "We don't have shutters on the windows." I said, "Come on, Rick." He says, "Okay, you can have your shutters." So, and then Marvin Rush, the DP, lit it from the top. What's his name? The famous cinematographer from The Godfather. He always he always top lit stuff. So Marvin did that as well. So it was great to be able to do that, to do kind of a hokey homage to the Godfather.
Gordon Willis.
Gordon Willis, yeah. How could I forget Gordon Willis's name?
I had to look it up.
That's okay.
He's good with the Google. Do you get a lot of people that come to you and say that recognize that was purposely done to have that Godfather homage in the beginning of the episode? Do people come up and tell you about that they actually it made sense? Is that just kind of an inside thing?
I think it's more of an inside. I would hope that some people got it, because to me it's pretty obvious. But it's I did it for me, so I'm good.
I'm going to disappoint you greatly, even though I disappoint Bill all the time on the podcast. I saw The Godfather for the very first time in my entire life less than 5 years ago. And I loved it. I loved it. I love it. It's one of my favorite movies. I absolutely love it, but it took me that long. Yeah.
It's a perfect movie. And The Godfather 2 is also a perfect movie. Mm-hmm. And I watch it continually all the time, and every frame is a masterpiece. Every scene is perfect. The casting was perfect. Perfect movies.
Did you watch The Offer on Paramount Plus, the sort of series that detailed or dramatized the production?
I don't remember. I know about The Offer. I'm not sure if we watched it. I watch so much stuff on TV now, I can't remember anymore.
I was actually
crazy.
I was actually surprised by how much I really enjoyed that series, because I've seen The Godfather at least 25 times. I think I watch it at least once a year. From the first time I saw it in like 99 or thereabouts.
If I didn't watch it, I have to watch it. And if I did watch it, I'm going to watch it again.
So we got to take a tour of Paramount just before the pandemic hit with a friend of ours who works there. And, you're going through the visitor center, and we're standing right by some of the notable Academy Awards, and we're just waiting for our private tour to kick off. And next thing I know, I'm standing next to the Best Picture Oscar for The Godfather. I'm like, what is this? This is amazing. I want this. It's one of my all-time favorite films. It's amazing. And I just put together now that there are elements of The Godfather in that episode, because as many times as I've seen it, it never dawned on
me. Well, the Grand Nagus is The Godfather.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah, true.
You mentioned the first script about Mrs. Troy and Data in a shuttlecraft. Did elements of that, or did that wind up becoming Odo and Loaxana and the turbo lift and the Forsaken? Were there any common elements that were reused, or?
There was another story that I submitted that didn't get bought, but I read a treatment for an upcoming script, and it was my story. And I told Jerry Taylor, I said, Jerry, that's my story. She says, David, you don't know how many shows are exactly the same, that everybody pitches everything, and you can't lay that on us. It's so many stories have similarities to it. So I accepted that explanation, and that's, I'm sure, was the case with the Mind's Eye, or the Loaxana Troy and Data story. It's there's only so many stories, and
right.
I ended up doing one like that with on Enterprise with Trip and Dominic. So,
Shuttlepod 1,
same kind of thing. Having people oil and water and have to get together to survive.
Oil and water. That's Bill and me, or Bill and I guess you could say. So I'm going to ask you a question, David, that you probably been asked 100 times before, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You've got 62 directing credits to your resume. We'll talk about The Visitor later. That's a special chapter that we're going to talk about. Is there something that stands out to you in all of those episodes that you did as really, really something special?
I was always most connected to the shows that left our current reality. We either came to Earth or we went to an alternate reality. I did a zombie show on Enterprise. Those were my favorite. I got kind of bored shooting on the ship and doing space battles and stuff. I loved it when we got off the ship, and again, it was fish out of water. You could see our people having to deal with situations and circumstances they weren't interested in. Also, visually, you could do a lot more. You could change the lighting. When I did a lot of alternate reality shows I did one on Deep Space Nine, a couple of them, where it was an alternate reality, and you could totally change the look. The characters were different. They were harder edged. They were tougher and nastier, and the visuals match that as well. So those were my favorite episodes to do. And they were more challenging visually because you could do more.
Oh yeah, by far. It's I'm always interested to see the changes in the medium. I look at sort of today's Star Trek, and a lot of it seems, I don't want to say overly cinematic, but it all seems very big and very galaxy shattering, if you will. I was going to say earth shattering, but that doesn't seem quite big enough. I think one of the things I love about 80s and 90s Star Trek, and even the 2000s, is that it's all still very personal. You can do a show like, the Enterprise zombie show, and it looks like incredibly close quarters, and, everything is very intimate in that sense, but you still get this sense of high stakes drama. And I there's a part of me that prefers some of that storytelling better, or more, I should say. Simply just because I think it resonates with me as a fan a little more. Do you find, as you look at things online and as you hear from various people that's true in a sense, or do you think it's just personal preference?
Well, I've heard that the new Star Trek shows do have this kind of epic and widescreen quality to them, and that the visual effects are really spectacular and all that, which is fine. Hey, however, whatever gets the drama to work. So whether it's intimate or I did a lot of very intimate dramas, and I did some that were just ball busters. But at the core, you have to have heart. You have to be telling a story that's compelling, and it has to be about life and death. If you follow those guidelines, then you can't. It doesn't matter what you put up on the screen as long as you have those elements. That sounds a little cliche, but that's the Aristotelian drama. It all goes back to that. A lot of stuff today, Michael Bay might be an example of it, where sometimes the heart is missing, and it's just about the largesse of it. And that's not to pick on Michael Bay, but he's symptomatic of that style of filmmaking. And
sure.
And I think there's something lacking when you lose the heart of it and the soul. Sorry, Michael.
Well, speaking of the heart and soul, Bill and I have had several discussions about this episode. We had a great panel during Trek Talks about this episode, and we have called it for years Star Trek's finest hour, and that's The Visitor. It is our number one ranked episode of Star Trek in the over 800 episodes that have been produced over the last 50 plus years. And of course, that was a heart-filled drama. I mean, how much more love and heart can you have in an episode that is about this bond between father and son? And although we've talked about it before on the telethon, David, can you take us back a little bit to what it was like to direct that episode? You had such great talent with Sirach and Tony Todd, and of course Avery. Is that one of the special moments of your career with Star Trek, with The Visitor?
Well, first of all, you guys have exquisite taste.
It's true.
Yeah, Steve Oster. I had gone freelance. I had left my producing job and came back as a freelance director, and I got the script for The Visitor, and I read it, and I went to Steve Oster, who had taken my position on Deep Space Nine. I said, Steve, I don't know what to do with this. I don't get this. It's all talk, and this isn't Star Trek. Well, this is the end of my directing career. And he said, David, go home and read it again, please. So I went home, I read it again, and then I looked over at my son, who was about 10 or 11 at the time. And I said to myself, oh, I get it. It had gone right over my head. And Well, I thank goodness I got it, because without understanding what the core of this thing was and what the heart was, it was just stupid on my part. I'll admit to that, but I did finally get it. And Michael Taylor, the original writer, and the amazing rewrite that Renee Echeverria did on it, which brought in much more of the heart. It ended up being an extraordinary piece of writing. So that was the gift to me as a director. The next job was, how do you cast this thing?
Yeah.
And
no.
I said, well, what about Sirach? which was a crazy idea, but they actually looked at Sirach and he did some tests and stuff, but it wasn't going to happen. He just didn't have the maturity to pull it off. And I remember standing outside of the casting office with Ron Surma, who was Junie Lowry's casting associate. And I'm saying, what are we going to do? We got to get, this actor's got to be unbelievable for this part. Who do we get? Who do we get? And Ron looked at me and said, how about Tony Todd? And I said, I don't know Tony Todd, but yeah, let's bring him in. Well, the rest is history. And my main job on the set with Tony was to not make him cry, and to tell him he couldn't cry on every take. It was the most emotionally wrenching performance that I have ever experienced. And then the woman the reporter, the visitor, is Andy Robinson's daughter, Rachel.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And she has not had a lot of acting experience or anything, but she came in and nailed it. I got a lot of help here. Ira said, David, what are you going to do? Aren't you going to rehearse this? And I said, rehearse? I'd never rehearsed anything. So I said to the actors, well, do you want to come to my house? And I happen to have a fireplace. And Rachel and Tony came over to my house. We sat in front of my fireplace and we rehearsed the heck out of it for a couple of days. We got all the beats down so that when we hit the stage, there was a fireplace there. It was just like being at my house. And we were able to let it all happen. So all these people forced me into paying attention to the material and to being aware that it was something special. So it's my gratefulness to all those who were involved in the process. The way that it was lit was beautiful. Everything about it, and I did a really good job of shooting it.
Hell yeah!
I was just gonna say, the music itself is its own character, and those tight shots that you have of him holding the baseball and just the whole way that the camera moves in that episode. You talked about it in The Godfather a few minutes ago. Everything in The Visitor, in my opinion, is perfect. It is the perfect Star Trek episode, David.
But all those close-ups, those were the days that I was sick and it was another director. But thank you anyway. No, the close-up is the most powerful tool in the director's toolkit. And as long as it's used properly and judiciously. And I tried to save the really, really, really close-ups for the very last moment. Mm-hmm. So thank you for recognizing it. I also contributed one other thing.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the episode, it's a dark and stormy night.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a dark and stormy night in the script, and I said, no, we got to make it a dark and stormy night because that's the cliche. It's got to be raining. She has to be coming in drenched. So that's what we did. That the special effects guys weren't too thrilled about it because they had to visqueen the entire area on the stage around there because of all the water that would leak out onto the stage floor. But they made it work.
It's all worth it.
I've seen plenty of movies and TV that make me emotional, whether extreme happiness or even, tears. But I have never seen a Star Trek episode that makes me literally weep. It's not just a good cry. I mean, it levels me every time I watch The Visitor. And I think literally every time. And I've seen it. I've lost count of how many times I've seen this episode because anytime it's on, I prepare because I have to have tissues. I have to have water. It's an experience every single time. And it is consistently awesome every single time. It loses nothing off a fastball.
That is so cool. That is so cool to hear. I watched it because we were going to talk about it in a Trek Talks, and I hadn't seen it in 15, 20 years. And I got teary-eyed.
Yeah.
I was because I was so detached from it, I was looking at it as an audience member, and I was really moved by it, I have to admit. But I have to admit something to you guys, because you called me on something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it was Dan who said, did Sisko remember what happened to him? Yep. And I said, oh, no. Well, when I looked at the episode, that portion of it again, and I think you guys are right.
Oh, God, thank you.
But from a directing standpoint, it doesn't matter what I thought. Right. It's what Avery thought. And I never asked Avery what his decision was. That's the secret of the actor. But as an actor, he had to make that decision, whether or not he remembered. But the way that he says the line, "I am now Jake," or whatever it is, I think I have to agree with you guys. But it's interesting because unlike in the Inner Light, Picard supposedly is affected for the rest of his life as a character by what happened on the Inner Light. And I remember us talking about it and how Patrick was going to remember this, and it would always color how he reacted because he lived this whole other life. I don't think that happened with Sisko. I don't think it reflected on the rest of his life. It may have, and Avery may have used it as an actor, but I don't know.
It's interesting. It's interesting because, you talked earlier about the close-up, and I think that Avery's look in that scene when he says, "I am now," kind of conveys that feeling to Dan and I that he has to remember, because I think it adds even more gravity to the story.
Right.
Well, I agree. It's better that he does remember. So I stand corrected.
Oh, no, because I mean, it's like you said, it's in the eye of the viewer to some extent. I think that given the relationship that Jake and Benjamin have, I can believe that Benjamin takes that with him, but they already had a very close and open and loving relationship that I think that probably just deepened it, for Benjamin in his own mind, because that was always on display throughout Deep Space Nine. And
it was genuine. Avery is a father figure to Sirach, and they still communicate, and it's really, from what I understand, a really lovely relationship. I was able to talk to Sirach a little bit about it recently.
Oh, that's good. One of the things I want to kind of pile onto what Bill said a minute ago, and I have to tell you, a few years back, I've seen it countless times as well, and like Bill said, full on weeping whenever the episode's on. And when I was doing a Deep Space Nine rewatch for me, but my wife was watching it for the first time, and she really got into it, I had to warn her before this episode. I said, "Hon, a minute and a half into this episode, I am going to be inconsolable. I just want to let you know right now." And sure enough, you, even if you try not to, you can't help but weep in this. And I wanted to say one thing about this episode too, David. You talked about the importance of the close-ups. As unbelievable as the end of this episode is with everything that happens, one of the most beautiful scenes for me in the entire episode is when Sisko is in sickbay and talking to Jake, and he says, "How are you doing?" And Jake just breaks down. That is one of the most powerful points of the entire episode to me. And there's still 40 minutes to go in the or 30 minutes to go in the episode. It's got that close up that we talked about. I just think it's just such a well acted and well written and well directed scene. It's just fantastic.
Sirach's got some chops, that's for sure.
He really does.
Yeah.
When you mentioned rewatching The Visitor real quick. Sorry to interrupt. I apologize.
No, go ahead.
Do you find yourself rewatching the finished product after you've directed and then sat through editing?
No. Invariably, I would never watch the episode after my director's cut because there might be some disappointment involved. That's not to cast aspersions on any particular process, but my cut was my version of the episode, and yet when I saw The Visitor with the music and everything, after all those years, it all worked perfectly. So, but I did get reprimanded by Rick Berman on the episode, though.
Really?
Really?
Yeah. He called me into his office after it was done, and he closed the door and he says, "David, I have to tell you, you made my wife cry." That's Rick's way to compliment one. That was the Rick Berman method.
That would do it.
That's awesome. One of the things I wanted to bring up with you, David, is a very personal one. We had a chance to chat in Vegas when we met, which was a fantastic night kicking off Trek Talks 2, but we got to have a moment together. And I told you my story, which all of our listeners know, so I won't go into detail about it. And you said something to me that just really, really hit me in a good way. I told you about how Star Trek saved my life, and you hugged me and said, "Wow, for me, it was just a job." Knowing the effect that you and all the other people who worked on Star Trek have made, does it change anything about how you thought of that time working on all of these episodes?
No question. What you did was you gave me a wonderful gift, because it really put things in perspective. It touched me so deeply, and it changed my opinion from it being a job to something where I was providing something that would give solace and succor to people. I knew that Gene had this positive view of the future, and that was the whole thing about the Star Trek universe. And we were all glad to work on the show, and that it always had a positive outlook on terms of the future of humanity, and that we always told little moral tales and stuff. But your experience made it so personal to me, and that made all the difference in the world. So again, I am grateful that you were willing to share that with me. It was a gift. So again, thank you.
Well, it's always been my desire to be able to share my story with the people that have been involved in Star Trek, because, I was a fan in the 70s, just like Bill was as a kid, but it has so much more meaning to me after what happened in the early 2000s. And even though it was Captive Pursuit was not your episode, it's still something that I want to thank everybody involved in Star Trek whenever I have the opportunity. And I'm willing to bet, and Bill, you'll probably back me up on this, I'm sure that there's somebody out there who's got a similar type of circumstance or feeling with what goes on in their life with their father or with their son, and having an episode like The Visitor helps change their lives also. I have no doubt that is out there somewhere.
Well, my son and I talk about it all the time. He knows the story about what happened, and we talk about The Visitor a lot, and the impact that it had on me. And I'm sure it colored our relationship in a way. It just made me more appreciative of what I had, because it's an episode about loss. Right. And loss is tough.
By far. It's interesting. We ran into you kind of haphazardly at the convention. And then it was literally right outside our booth. We didn't realize it was you because, of course, you had your mask on. We had our mask on. And then you took off your mask. I'm like, oh, my God, it's David. This leads me to, springboarded off of what Dan was just talking about. You clearly have been to Star Trek conventions, probably plural. Do you like being able to sort of mix in among the fans and take part in the discussion, or even just to observe?
Yeah, you say I took off my mask. Dan was blue.
Well, that's true. Yeah, he was.
He was an Andorian. Were you an Andorian? Is that what you were?
No, I was actually Thanos from the Marvel universe in a Starfleet uniform.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it was pretty scary, is what it was. But I love being with the fans. I got to see all these people that were my cohorts for so many years.
Yeah.
And it was like with you guys, it's a bromance. With all my guys, it was a bromance seeing all of them again, and we're all, hugging and stuff. And And it's really special. And the fans are crazy because some of them recognize me. What's really horrifying, though, is they not only recognize me, they cosplay me. There was a woman at the convention who came up to me. She looked like Albert Einstein. She had this weird hair and this green sweater on. And I said, "Hi, how are you?" She says, "Hi, I'm you." I said, "What do you mean I'm you?" She said, "I play you as a cosplayer." And she dressed as David Livingston and goes to conventions playing me. That's insane, but wonderful. And the green sweater was actually the color of the sweater that's my publicity photo for the convention.
Yes.
And the hair was ostensibly what my hair was. But that's not the only cosplay story. I was at an event one day, and this woman comes up to me out of the blue, and she says, "Are you David Livingston?" And I said, "Yeah." And she says, I play you. I'm a cosplayer and I play you." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "I play you." I said, "You mean me?" She said, "No, you as the fish. I dress up as Livingston at a convention." She says, "I have a full body suit of the fish and I cosplay you." That is unbelievable. I mean, here's somebody behind the scenes, behind the camera, and I've got two people who are cosplaying me. That is just mind-blowing.
It's all those DVD special features you've been in.
I guess so. I just wish I had a picture of her in the fish, though. That's something.
Oh, I'm sure it's out there somewhere.
It's got
when I have gone to conventions, you have to sign at the end. It's part of your contract. Yeah. And they bring up the little trading cards. And I had 3 trading cards. 2 of them were my face and one was the fish. And invariably the fish would outsign the others 10-1.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Yeah.
So going back to your conversation with Dan, where you said this was just a job back in the day, in hindsight, from my perspective as a fan, and also now as somebody whom I'm happy to call, a friend of yours, can you see a little bit about how much this fandom appreciates your work and truly loves your contributions?
Yeah, you don't know how gratifying it is. I mean, I'm a legend in my own mind now. It's crazy. I should ask for more money, but it was scale, Thank God there's still residuals. I mean, I've died. Hey, my career would have never been anything like it was, even if I got to finally direct episodic, without the Star Trek world. That was unique. And it was a unique world for all of us who got to work on it. And it's the gift that keeps on giving. I get to go to conventions and see all my old buddies. I get to meet you guys. I get to do Trek talks and try and raise money for the Hollywood Food Coalition. I mean, Star Trek is the gift that keeps on giving. And it's all because of that one guy back in the 60s who said, "Okay, I got an idea where humanity is going to come out on the positive side here," and how that has resonated across decades, half a century. It's extraordinary what this man did. And I got to tell you, I don't think he had a clue when he was doing it that what he brought, but he had a vision and he had an idea and he brought it to fruition. And so many artists subsequent to that have fed into that and have been kept honest to it, even though Rick, had on his, what he had on his desk.
Yeah, the Gene bust with the blindfold.
Bust,
yeah. Right, but he still was faithful to Gene. I think other people may have different views about Rick, but I love Rick Berman. I owe him my career.
It's funny, David, you just said something that made me think, and again, I'm not disparaging in any way. I wouldn't be surprised if the mindset was similar to what you used to think. It was just a job for him. He did so many things back then. This was just another thing that he wanted to get off the ground. And now look where we are.
And got canceled by NBC in the second season. And
right.
Okay, that's the end of that.
Yep.
Well,
this thing will never last.
50 years later, 60 years later, it's whoa.
So
insane.
I hope that next year in Las Vegas for the convention, which will be back at the Rio, we hope you'll be there. 2, we hope your better half will be with you because we met her this past year and we just absolutely adored her. But more importantly, we hope that you'll join us for a panel that's yet to be determined, and we hope you'll be our guest at our annual party in Vegas, which is usually the biggest party of the weekend. Because
I would love that. I hope that I haven't worn out my welcome. I don't know if Adam and will have me back again. But the Rio, really? I thought they were going to dynamite that thing.
Who would have ever thought people would say, I can't wait till the convention is back at the Rio?
Well, I know that there were issues, but it's a little long in the tooth. I mean, come on.
It's not as long as Bally's.
Well, okay. It was. Hey, I was glad to be there. We had a great time. Dorothy, as you said, is my wife, and we had our pup Lulu along as well.
They were both great.
We loved doing that. So great.
David, we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up the Hollywood Food Coalition and the wonderful work that you do for that organization. It just happened to be with a conversation with John Billingsley last year that this all came to be with Trek Talks and a very successful first fundraiser last year. What is it like to be not only on the board with Hollywood Food Coalition, but to be able to be there to help these people? Because that's something you're very passionate about. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in that and what it's like for you to be working with HOFOCO on a daily basis.
My career now is as a photographer. I'm an entertainment photographer for Getty Images. I shoot red carpet, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But my private work, one of the projects that I did starting in 2019 was we go out for walks with our dog, and in parks all around Los Angeles and in Santa Monica along the Palisades Park, and the homeless. I would take pictures with my iPhone, and when I got home and I put the pictures into my Photos app, almost all of them were of homeless people. And I said, the camera is trying to tell me something. So for the next 6 months, I went around with my iPhone only and photographed the homeless all through Los Angeles County. And I put up a couple of photo exhibits of the homeless. And John Billingsley saw the first, the prototype of the first exhibit, and was very moved by the photographs and asked if I wanted a partnership with his organization called the Hollywood Food Coalition. And I said, great. So we had a partnership and we had a great turnout. People all around the world came to the 2 exhibits, and we got a ton of physical and monetary donations. And after that, John asked if I wanted to join the board of directors, and I said yes. So I made a 3-year commitment, and I've been with them ever since. For a year, I shot all their social media and still photography for all of their social media, and then we launched Trek Talks, which was introducing the Hollywood Food Coalition to the Star Trek community, and it's an organization which basically provides food to those who can't get it, who can't afford it, who are down on their luck. And it's so basic. The first thing you need is shelter. The second thing you need is food. If you don't have those 2 things, you can't function as a human being. Mm-hmm. So I am proud to be part of an organization that's giving at least one of those important elements so that people can hopefully get out of the morass that they're in. And so many people in the last couple of years, especially with COVID, have fallen through the cracks. They've gone from the lower middle class and into poverty and to homelessness. And my hope and desire is that whatever we're doing in the Hollywood Food Coalition, in terms of food distribution all around Los Angeles County, is to give that helping hand and to give that meal so that people have hope to rise above their given circumstances. So I'm proud to be part of it, and I'm so grateful to you guys producing the Trek Talks Zoomathon with John Champion with the Roddenberry Foundation, and as you said, we raised $80,000, and I'm hoping we make at least $100K this coming January. So again, thank you for what you guys did. It was, and we had 100% turnout. Everybody
Oh my gosh.
Everybody that we asked appeared. They might have been in their car, holding up the phone while they were driving, which probably wasn't a good idea. I think Garrett did that, but that's typical Garrett. But don't tell him I said that. But yeah, people, everybody showed up one way or another. It was phenomenal, the turnout.
It's amazing because as we sit here in New Hampshire, and you're about as far away from us as you can be in California, as we were planning and producing Trek Talks, you sent me some of the images from your Still Lives project photos. And I have to say that it really kind of brought what we were doing home for me. I mean, because we live in New Hampshire, although there is a homeless issue, or I don't want to say problem, because there's an issue with having too many homeless people in New Hampshire and our largest city. It's nowhere near the extent it is in some of the major metropolitan areas like New York or Los Angeles or Boston. So while it's easier to, I don't want to say avoid or to turn a blind eye to, I was grateful for your photographs because it really brought the humanity home to me. And that's really when light kind of dawned on Marblehead here. And I said, wow, this is what we're doing. This is who we're helping. These people, not homeless people, these people. And I really have to thank you for sharing those, because I really think they are wonderful art.
But you're welcome. But your experience was exactly mine. I was in the avoidance stage. And once I started walking around with my iPhone, it was so in my face that I couldn't avoid it any longer. And I had, for my own sake, I had to deal with it. So I interpreted the work from my personal point of view, and it seemed to resonate. John Billingsley particularly said, because I highly saturate everything and make the world that these people live in seem okay. Yeah. And that's not a negative. It's to make them more accessible. Mm-hmm. So many times I see pictures of homeless people where they're down and out. It's black and white. It's ugly. It's horrible. It's hideous. My approach to it was the opposite. And that seemed to have worked. It certainly worked for John, and it worked for a lot of the audience. So I appreciate you getting that part of it, because that was the intention, to make them seem like people, not just homeless people. Yeah, so thank you.
No, thank you. It removed the bleakness from those other types of photos that you remember, because everything always seems very empty, very, without hope. And I think that's what, you talk about the saturation. I think that's what the brilliance in those photos is. It's like, we all live in the same world, but we all have markedly different, experiences. And to see something of their experience really just, I don't want to say it was a slap in the face, but that's as close as I can come.
Yeah. A lot of them lead very, very rich lives. A lot of times it's just in their head, but right. And I had a lot of them, and I had great conversations with them. I mean, this one guy, he had a mirror that he always held up, and I'm saying, and I got a picture of him holding up his mirror, and he's holding up, and I said, "What are you doing with the mirror?" And he says, "I'm reflecting all the bad rays back into space so they can't come down to Earth." So God bless these people. Mm-hmm. I mean, this guy may have personally saved the Earth, and we don't know that. How do we know that's not real? Right. I mean, that would have made a great Star Trek episode.
Absolutely.
Who's to say whether he's not right? I'm not. God bless him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we hope to accomplish with Trek Talks too, David, is to be able to bring this fandom, which is so big and so passionate, together to shine a light on this issue, so that we can get one of the things that John Billingsley has talked about is to get more involvement in different communities other than Los Angeles, but at the same time be Hollywood Food Coalition related. So I'm really hoping that we have as successful an event as we did last year. Like you said, I'm looking for at least 6 figures. It's going to happen. I'm going to say it right now. Gavel is coming down. It's going to happen, and it's going to be a fantastic event.
Well, and we define it as Trektivism. Star Trek, mm-hmm. We want to translate that point of view about life into activism. And I don't know who coined the term Trektivism. It's great, but that's what it's about. How do we motivate those people who live the values of Star Trek? How do we get them to then give that to the community? So that's our goal. And again, I'm grateful for all of the people that participated and gave, and all the people that volunteer. And hey, we're all in this together. We're all on one big thing rotating around. And
that's right.
Absolutely. We need to get that's the case.
Well, we're looking forward to the event. It's going to be January 14th, 2023. David, it's been fantastic having you on Trek Geeks finally to talk about your experiences. David Livingston, ladies and gentlemen, the Star Trek director, 62 episodes. It's been so great to get to know you over the course of the last year and a half, and to call you a friend, David. And we look forward to the time that we can get together in person again to celebrate this thing called Star Trek and a successful Trek Talks 2. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
You know, Dan, after we did our original Trek Talks telethon just earlier this year, we keep saying last year, but it was this year.
That's true.
We talked for a long time about that visitor panel and sort of David's idea that Benjamin didn't remember everything. You and I were just totally flabbergasted.
I was like, what?
It's like, did we not read it right? I mean, to hear him today was amazing. I was stunned that he came to that revelation.
I was like, oh my God, we are being... He's correcting himself based on what we said in that panel, and he went and rewatched it. Oh my God. And I'm so glad he did. It made me feel great, because trying to think of how it would be like that Ben didn't remember, it would never make sense to me. And I'm so glad that he now thinks the same way that we do.
I'm glad that we're not idiots. I think this is what this comes down to.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. We're both huge idiots, but at least now we have somebody agreeing with us, which is pretty cool.
Enormous idiots. David has lowered himself to our level. That's really what this comes down to.
That pretty much, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, totally. But what a fantastic conversation. You and I have talked to a lot of people involved with Star Trek. Mm-hmm. And every time we say this is probably one of my favorite, but I mean this with no hyperbole, this absolutely was one of my favorite conversations of the almost 300 episodes we've ever done.
I can't agree more. It was so much fun. The energy he brings. I mean, this was a long time ago that he did this stuff, and he still has so much passion for it, and he remembers so many details, and that's what a good director does, I'm sure, and somebody who's really good at his job. And it was just a true blessing to have him on the show finally, as we get close to 300. It took us long enough, but I guess we saved the best for later.
For 292. Yeah. And you say a long time ago, the dude's only 39. I mean, he's not that old.
I know. He was like 6 when he directed his first episode.
I know. It's really amazing. Dan, you know what else is fabulous and tremendous?
Fabulous. Tremendous.
Fabulous. Our friends, the band 5 Year Mission. Mm-hmm. You know, we talk about them every week, and we do it out of love, because without them, the Trek Geeks podcast would not sound the way it does. We love what their music adds to this show. It's almost like its own character in our podcast, in a sense. We talk about how the music influences Star Trek.
Exactly.
The music influences our discussion, and it just wouldn't be the same show without it. So we want everyone to head on out to 5yearmission.net, become a huge fan of the band. Please, we're begging you, because they truly are awesome. One song for each of the original episodes of classic Star Trek. And who knows what they'll do when the 5-year mission's over? Maybe they'll extend. You never know.
You never know. When I'm not getting sued by them, I love them also.
You got sued once, and it was your own fault.
It was, but that's the only time I didn't love them. And then it was kind of like a neutral decision, so I love them anyway. Don't even start me on that one. I'm just going to go right back. But I want to talk to you about this week's episode, because it's very, very important.
I'm sure you do.
It is, yeah. So I got to tell you, I know you're going to agree with me, Bill. I love Lower Decks, and you love Lower Decks. Fair statement, correct? Yes, I think it is.
Absolutely fair.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so funny. The characters are so great. Like the guy who has all those cybernetic implants to help him play drums better. It's a good thing, too, otherwise, because the band might have replaced him at some point. I'm not going to lie. It is a mystery how he got those implants. I hope we're going to see that maybe in season 3 or season 4. I'm just happy that they did put those implants in. You know what I'm talking about, buddy. I know you passed out, and you probably can't even hear me, but but it's good old Ensign Sam Rutherford. He is a class act drummer, man, and I can't wait to see what happens with him as we continue down the road of Lower Decks. Hello, Bill.
I'm dead.
Yes, I don't even see him on screen right now, but yeah,
I'm dead. I don't know what the hell is going on in your head. Sam Rutherford.
Yeah, hey, you know what? He's a good drummer now. Not to say that he was a bad drummer before, because I know that's what the next comment's going to be. But now he's just got that extra cybernetic. Yeah.
I guess that's better than you doing something like the USS Farkritos.
Oh, I would never do something that dumb. That's
you absolutely would do something like that.
Farkritos.
These are terrible.
Oh, come on now. I beg to differ, and I think some of our listeners do too, and I can't wait to see their comments.
The listeners love you, Dan, and I'm pretty convinced they don't want to hurt your feelings. I have long since passed that barrier.
Wow.
And I just don't care.
Okay. Well, thank you anyway. Sam Rutherford. Yep.
Yeah. 5yearmission.net. Go get all their albums. We're begging you. And listen to their podcast here on the Trek Geeks Podcast Network, because it's pretty awesome. We're not going to lie.
Yeah.
Of course, Dan, we have this fantastic Patreon campaign, and we're so lucky to have so many people provide their support to the Trek Geeks Podcast Network via Patreon. Every bit of growth that Trek Geeks has seen over the past 7 years is directly related to the support that we got on Patreon. And we are so grateful for everybody that supports us.
Absolutely. It's hard to put into words how it feels when we look on our Patreon page and see so many people are there interacting, going on Discord, which is one of the perks that you can get when you're on Patreon, and having conversations, even though I'm not there nearly as much as I should be. But that's a discussion for another time. You can also get pins, t-shirts, and I got to say, who would not want to hear unedited shenanigans of Bill and I? You're going to get that if you want to join Patreon. So head on over to our page and just join. Check it out. TrekGeeks.com/Patreon. You're going to get all the details. It's going to be fantastic.
Patreon.com/TrekGeeks.
I didn't write it down this time.
That's why it's later in the copy.
That's right. I saw it's okay. So we'll just try that again. But right now we want to take a moment to see unedited shenanigans. That's
going to stay in.
Oh, I know. You leave all my mistakes in, and that's okay. Right now we do want to take a moment to thank our associate producers for Trek Geeks. As always, we are just so grateful for their support, and they are Vikram Bhatt, Brad DeMag, William Edward M. Jr., Patrick Escudero, Andy Fark, Kimberly Francis, Jonathan Hamilton, Peter Hong, William Jackson, Ryan Jeffs, John Krikorian, Sean Lynn, Rick Mason, Jamie McGregor, Ross McKinney, Jim McMahon, Aaron Mollenkoff, Helen Reed, Sarah Rutlinger, Tim Robertson, Desi Rogers, Greg Rozier, Eric Sakian, Adam Sanders, Tim Serdar, Heather Sohn, Blake Strike, Rick Tatro, Lisa Tomlinson, Ron Robel, and the gracious and wonderful Connie Hutchins.
Wow, you really jumped up an octave there. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Of course, we want to thank our Trek Geeks producers for their support. They are Mike Bovia, Steve Bovia, Jazz Bradshaw, Kyle Castillo, Peter Craig, Andy Davenport, Craig Ewing, Jackie and Chris Hackney, Kimberly Hartman, David Hood, Lionel Marchand, Matt McGonigal, Darren Metcalf, Charlie Mulvey, Sean O'Halloran, Casey Pettit, Jamie Rogers, Major Self, Casey Shafsky, Terry Shull, Jim Stoffel, Chris Trebuzio, Ken Tripp, Christina Werther, and the lovely and talented Jess Vashon. Dan, the senior producer of Trek Geeks, is the tremendously terrific Jude Tatman.
Tremendously terrific. I like that. Every week it's a great description. You too can become a producer on the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. It is so easy to do. Here's that spot in the copy that I didn't think was there before. Head on over to patreon.com/TrekGeeks for all the details.
You have been reading that copy for 3 years.
I'm like, why is it not where it's supposed to? Because it was where it was supposed to. I was just ahead of myself or behind myself. I really don't care.
Oh, my word. Of course, for more great... No, wait. I'm skipping ahead because I'm lost.
See what you do?
Dad, next week, and I assure you this is totally by coincidence.
Yes.
But as we record this episode, it was 54 years ago today that this particular episode first aired. And suffice it to say, it's the one that generates a lot of opinion on both sides of the Star Trek aisle.
Yeah, 54 years. That's just absolutely unbelievable. It's nuts. It was the premiere of season 3 of TOS. It's still one of my favorite episodes. Some people say it's the worst episode of TOS, but we happen to love it. Morgues, eye morgues, pain belts, and a Frankenstein-like Vulcan running off the world's first TV remote. We're going to defend TOS Season 3 Spock's Brain, and we're going to do it next week on Trek Geeks, the flagship of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network.
And you know what? Next week, we're only going to use 5-year mission bumps from the Spock's Brain album.
That's pretty smart.
We're going to tie it all together next week on Trek Geeks. Of course, for more great Star Trek discussion, please check out the other member podcasts here on the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. So many shows all created by passionate fans who just want to celebrate Star Trek and Gene's vision. You can find all our podcasts in the free Trek Geeks mobile app, or get a link to your favorite podcast player by visiting trekgeeks.com/listen.
The Trek Geeks Podcast Network. No one talks Trek like we do.
They really don't, because they couldn't.
No.
And of course, for all the news on all the Star Trek show, please visit our great friends at treknews.net. For now, this has been episode number 292 of the Trek Geeks Podcast. We do hope you all live long and prosper.
Wow, wow, coconut, wow, wow,
No.
coconut, wow, wow.
No. No. Do not sully that song with coconut. The match game think cue music is it should be revered, not butchered with coconut. No.
Music for Trek Geeks is provided by 5-Year Mission. They're writing an original song for each episode of Star Trek. Hear more of their music at 5yearmission.net. Trek Geeks is a production of Coconut Media Works. Executive producers Bill Smith and Dan Davidson. For more great Star Trek discussion, discover the other shows of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network at trekgeeks.com, or find us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
Bing, bing, bong. Bum, bum.
Wow. That was
little Ocean's 11 for you there.
I liked that. That was probably one of the best bing bongs we've had. So bing bong back at you, baby.
And that's for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
There's a tie-in to Buck Rogers here.
Okay.
So Henry Silva, the last remaining unofficial member of the Rat Pack, died at the age of 95 this week. Also this week, the 43rd anniversary of Buck Rogers in the 25th century.
I did see that.
In which Henry Silva was Killer Kane.
I did not know that.
He was in the movie. He didn't do the series. That was Michael Ansara.
I did not know that. That is some wild and really good stuff.
Did you see Buck Rogers in the theater when it came out?
I want to say yes, but I honestly don't remember. I think I did.
So I went to a theater in Hooksett, New Hampshire. It was the Jerry Lewis Theater, because there used to be a string of Jerry Lewis movie theaters. Yep. And this was the only one in New Hampshire, and that space now is a butcher shop.
Okay.
It was a terrible little theater. But Buck Rogers was a terrible little movie.
It's one of the ones that, it's kind of like, if I remember correctly, didn't it go along the same lines with Battlestar Galactica? Battlestar Galactica came out with a movie, and then they came out with the series, and in the movie, Baltar dies. Like, he gets beheaded by the Cylons pretty quickly.
That's right.
But in the movie, he's back. And then the TV version, as they're swinging the sword, the Imperious leader says, wait. And so he's spared. Is it similar with Buck Rogers, how it was a movie and then it became a TV series?
Yes. Okay. And in fact, both those shows are from Glenn Larson, the producer, who also did like Knight Rider and a bunch of others. Mm-hmm. And in fact, when the movie debuted on NBC for the first time, they actually added a scene to the end, which sort of showed Buck's life starting off in New Chicago and having him go to work for the Earth Defense Directorate, which launched the next week, which was the premiere of the series.
Wow. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. But clearly not part of the film when it was released.
That's okay. I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for Erin Gray. I loved her in that show. That vampire episode.
Wilma Deering.
Oh my God. One of the hottest scenes ever on television as a child was when she was fighting that space vampire guy.
And that vampire just looked really dumb.
So dumb. Worse than you dumb.
Wow.
Well, I have to get it in there now because I'm going to be nice the rest of the day. So.
Are you?
Yeah.
That'd be a first.
Love you.
Love you. See, in the first season, Wilma Deering, or even in the movie, Wilma Deering is a very competent, tough as nails officer.
Yep.
It's through the rest of the series she becomes kind of Buck's sidekick and sort of prototypical woman in second position that has to defer to a man.
Yeah. Yes, I will agree with that wholeheartedly. But I still love her. She was always great.
Oh, I love Erin
That
Gray.
show was just not. It was not. I'm kind of wondering. I think I got to give the nod to Battlestar Galactica over Buck Rogers of which show was better.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Buck
I agree,
Rogers
100%.
was just a little bit. Yeah. So
Dumb.
So people can't see it on screen, but I'm going to show you my progress on my phaser rifle. Look at that bad boy.
To describe it for everybody, you've got the body, the stock, the barrel, all put together. It's pretty life size. The only thing you don't really have is sort of the scope attachment that goes on the top, it looks like.
And I just started chapter 6, which is the final chapter of the build, and that scope is part of that last chapter. So I should be finished with this within the next day or two, because I only work on it when I have a few minutes in between tasks at work. But it's solid, dude, and it is 1-to-1. It is an exact size of the one from First Contact.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it's sturdy. It's great. I only had one piece that I couldn't find, but luckily I was able to find a similar piece in some of my leftover Lego kit from past builds. And it's hidden underneath stuff, so you can't even really tell.
That's cool. I finished my Enterprise D over the weekend. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it is.
The Enterprise D isn't even my favorite ship, but I've got a new appreciation for it after doing this Blue Bricks build.
Yep.
It is a great set. I've had some people ask me online, well, is it as good as Lego?
It is.
I'm really skeptical. It 100% hands down as good as Lego quality-wise.
Yep.
It's fantastic.
It's better than the Enterprise Mega Blocks build.
Yes.
Much sturdier, and I've said if Star Trek ever gets a Lego license, I'm going to go bankrupt. Well, Blue Bricks is going to make me go bankrupt because they just announced they had the Runabout, which I'm going to definitely get. They just announced a large Voyager. They just announced a large USS Defiant.
Yes.
Klingon Disruptor, Delta Flyer. I mean, they're awful humans.
I'm thinking about that Deep Space Nine, but the problem is I have nowhere to put it.
That's right, and that's a big one. That's going to take up a lot of space, at least with the rifle and the disruptor. The Klingon Disruptor, by the way, I was watching the all in German, so they do have closed caption. Yeah. They showed the Klingon Disruptor. It actually comes apart, so it's a gun, so that you can take the stock off and holster that bad boy. It's so great.
It's bluebricks.com, BLUEBRIXX. Don't worry about the site being in German. Yep. You can access it in English. Yep. They sell everything in the euro, which is almost 1-to-1 for the dollar. So there's really not much of an exchange rate to deal with. And shipping is not terrible.
No, it's
because they're shipping from Germany.
And the good thing is they accept PayPal. So if you have a PayPal credit, you can do 6 months no financing on it also. Because it's usually the big ones are, between $150 and $200. So I recommend it. I mean, they're fantastic. I really love what they've done so far.
I love their product. Yeah. They do such a great job. So, I may buy the Deep Space Nine and just keep it until after we move, when I have more room, in theory, so that I have it, because I don't want them to sell out.
Well, that's true. And has some of the stuff sold out? I think some of the things have sold out. But yeah, they have, and in the last video I watched, they kind of hinted that they still got more big ones coming. So I'm looking forward to it. I think the Enterprise E was another one that they have announced on their website.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so there's a lot they're doing. I'm so glad that they got this license because they are really good quality builds.
I'm really more than impressed. I had very low expectations going in based on both Mega Blocks and Creo.
Yes.
Remember the Creo Enterprise from the 2009?
Yep.
Because those ones are not great.
No, especially the Creo one. I don't like those at all.
Oh, the Creo one's terrible.
Yep.
I still bought it and I built it, but this Enterprise is... I hate using Lego quality because it makes it sound like that Blue Bricks is inferior, but it is the quality of some of the best building sets I've ever built.
Right. I absolutely agree. So yeah. So order, bankrupt I come.
I declare bankruptcy. Have you gotten to that episode of The Office?
I have not.
Okay.
I have not.
Michael goes through some money troubles.
Well, okay. Well,
and decides he's going to declare bankruptcy.
Not surprised.
Except he doesn't quite understand what that means.
Oh, Michael doesn't understand something? Please.
I know.
That's awesome.
I know. I was talking to my wife last night, and we were talking about your watch through The Office and also Chris Mumphrey's watch through The Office. And Mumphrey sent me a text last night just with a random line from an episode, so I knew where he was at.
Oh, okay.
He's much further along from you are. So conversely, I think my wife has more respect for Chris.
That's okay. That's fine. I know that I'm nothing to you or her, so that's fine. I'm just working on the dog. That's all I care about.
That's reasonable, although Isabella is a fairly tough judge of character.
Yeah,
I think she loves The Office, by the way.
I'm sure she does.
You may want to step that up.
I have not watched any Office since our trip to Vegas, but I'm hoping to. But what I've been doing at lunch usually lately is trying to catch up on Lower Decks because we're doing Discovering Trek Lower Decks, so I haven't been able to watch it as much. But it'll happen.
It'll happen. You'll get your crap together.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking right.
I doubt it.
No, not at all. When do I ever do that?
You're not that bright.
I am not bright at all. I'm a dope.
You're a dummy. God.
But fun conversation to be had with Mr. Livingston.
So as we record this, we've already talked to David.
Yeah.
We did it last night, and
wow,
man, just what a wonderful guy
he is.
He's just so. I'm trying to think of the right word. He's just so very likable.
He is, and
I don't mean to sound surprised. No, but I mean it's just he's just a joy. He really is.
What I found so great is, and this isn't a dig in any way, shape, or form, but when we have our weekly meetings for Trek Talks and now Trek Talks 2, we have a bunch of people in the meetings usually. And David's not one to really say a lot in those meetings. He's taking it all in. He's got plans in his head. He's writing stuff down. He doesn't interact a whole lot. He does interact, but not a whole lot. Last night was like opening the floodgates, and just hearing those stories was fantastic. My night was made with that conversation last night.
He's very thoughtful in our meetings.
Yes.
He considers everything.
Yes, he does.
Which I imagine is probably a bit of an occupational hazard.
That's what a director does.
Right?
Yep.
So, last night, just sort of the unfiltered, let's just have fun with this. Let's talk about it. Man, what a great time. Yeah. And I imagine he's got stories that could go on for episode upon episode.
Absolutely.
Which I'd be fine with, quite frankly.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to lie, I'm going to pat myself back a little bit. I was happy with the intro that I did. I didn't expect that reaction from him. That was just so ecstatic when he reacted to that. So my night was made, and I was smiling the rest of the night.
I couldn't even give you crap.
But now you can, so that's okay.
Because not only did you write a fantastic intro, you didn't even stumble over any of the words.
I was with the biggest director in Star Trek history. I wasn't going to F that up.
Dude, you found a way to mess up Frakes, okay?
He doesn't hold the record.
Dude, he's Riker.
He didn't hold the record.
he holds plenty of records because he's Riker.
He's Riker, and I screwed it up. But I've gotten better. I've been practicing.
That's why you haven't been watching The Office. Anyway, you ready to do this?
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's get it over with. Let's do it. Get it over with.
Get it on.
Get it on.
There's no musical interlude here.
Sorry.
Shut up.
Couldn't help it.
You can help it. That's the problem. All right. Stop talking. Daddy's working.